Murray, would you like to see the veil banned here?
Well, I think, like a majority of British people, I think that it should be banned in public places, particularly places like courtrooms, where it's absolutely imperative that a jury are able to see the faces of people who are accused. As for an overall ban, I think, look, my own opinion is that niqab is highly undesirable, but it should be certainly a desirable thing to discourage its wearing.
To impose a ban, but in principle you'd like to see one because you think in Britain it's unacceptable.
In public buildings, in courts, in schools, in places like this, absolutely, I think a ban would be very sensible. In streets and so on, I think it's difficult, but it should be societally discouraged.
We've got talented Muslim women who've got a lot to give to this society, who've been doing so and been very sensible about it. When we need to remove our face veils, we do it. But how do you think we get through airport security?
I mean, what about the fact that 56% of people are saying they don't want it here?
You know what?
We show our faces.
Exactly. The British society, the fabric of the British society is respecting the public freedom.
We are
and
British.
Public freedom is part of it, the religious freedom.
What about the fact that people feel uneasy? They said they don't know how to relate to women who have their faces covered.
First of all, let them interact with us. Let us be open and engaging with them.
I'm sorry.
The issue is the problemization here. It's not existent problem at all.
I'm sorry. I worked in this area for 7 years, about 15 years ago, and this was not, as you said, a norm. This has been imported and exported for reasons which we haven't got time to go into.
In engaging with your elderly white neighbour who feels uneasy, sometimes you remove the veil. When you worked with children, you remove the veil. Isn't that an acknowledgement that it is difficult for people to engage with women who have their faces covered?
Yeah, I think it is. And I also honour what Douglas Murray has just said.
Douglas Murray thinks the niqab shouldn't be allowed in public places, especially in courtrooms, where juries need to see the faces of the accused. He feels that since a lot of social interaction in British society depends on seeing people's faces, the niqab is problematic. While he admits that banning it on the streets is tricky, he believes it should be discouraged in general. Murray points out that the niqab makes it harder for people to communicate and interact, and it creates unnecessary barriers. He also dislikes the idea that the niqab suggests women are a danger to men and society, which he completely disagrees with. Some of the other women on the panel completely disagreed with Murray, saying he was overreacting. They emphasized that the niqab is a key part of Muslim women's religious and cultural identity. They believe that wearing it is a personal choice and an expression of their faith that should be respected in a diverse society. They also highlighted that many Muslim women feel empowered and protected by wearing the niqab, and it's a deeply personal decision, not something forced on them. Now let's get right into it.
In 2015, I was reporting from across my continent, across Europe, when people were coming in unprecedented numbers. We were talking about the German population taking in an additional 2% in a single year alone, where basically the German Chancellor said anyone who makes it to Europe can come. I realize this is just a version of a problem that every country is having to think about. And we're very lucky countries, yours and mine. We're countries that people want to come to. And that isn't an easy thing to deal with, because we know that we cannot take in the world.
Agreements with North African countries and looking at trying to return some people where they came from.
Bribed Turkey.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen?
Well, we already know some of the consequences. German elections saw a party that's generally described as far-right, the AfD, is now the main party of opposition in the German parliament. Unbelievable social problems, unbelievable problems with freedom of expression. I mean,
not me. All good. Okay. What do you think should happen now to address this situation?
Look, I just, as I say, we have to think about this much more seriously and deeply than we've been thinking about it. A lot of people make a lot of very easy social capital, including a lot of politicians make very easy social capital by basically saying, we're generous, we're open, let them come. They quote John Lennon quite often. Type of immigration we do want, and that means the type of immigration that we just don't need more of. These are really ugly and difficult conversations to have, but it's my belief that if we don't have them, other people will have them, and very bad people will have them. I'm not willing to hand that terrain over. I'm just not willing to do it.
Douglas Murray's book, The Strange Death of Europe, dives into talks about immigration, identity, and Islam in Europe. He argues that Europe is facing a major crisis due to mass immigration, which he saw close up in 2015. Murray believes it's not just about the numbers. It's a deep shift that's shaking up Europe's cultural and social fabric. He highlights Germany as a prime example, criticizing Chancellor Angela Merkel and her open-door policy. According to Murray, letting in so many immigrants so quickly has strained resources and sparked cultural tensions. This, he says, has fueled the rise of far-right groups like the AfD, who are now capitalizing on the public's frustration. Murray is frustrated with how superficial and politically driven the immigration debate often is. He feels Europe needs to have a more serious discussion about how many immigrants it can handle and what kinds are most beneficial. If not, he worries that extreme voices will dominate the conversation, leading to even worse solutions.
Douglas, first of all, what was your reaction to this interview with an NHS doctor last night on this show?
Let me first of all say that it's necessary to clear quite a lot of things up because we've heard quite a lot of hogwash in the last few minutes. Firstly, your guest last night is a member of an extremist organisation, Hizb ut-Tahrir, which is banned in many countries, including in European countries, that has a revolutionary ideology that wants to replace government in Muslim countries as well as in... do you know Germany?
One European country is banned in, Douglas Murray. I'm not going to let you lie to the audience like you usually do. You're going to justify everything you say on this show, Douglas Murray.
Is this Mr. Al-Andalusi? Can I just check? Because I can't see you.
It is, yeah.
Is that him?
Yeah.
OK. This is a guy, he's of no significance, but he's a guy who I have seen in studios for years, spouting extreme Islamist rhetoric. Many years ago, he couldn't condemn the killing of the journalists at Charlie Hebdo. Last year, he wouldn't condemn the attempted murder of Salman Rushdie. Now he can't do this. The question that Piers put to me before you try to interrupt again.
Only if you don't lie.
Let him answer, please.
First of all...
Let him answer, please.
But all right.
First of all, I'm not going to keep being talked over by this Islamist blowhard. Let me speak.
Murray had a lot to say about Dr. Abdul Wahed and his views. He called out Dr. Wahed for his support of Hamas and his denial of the October 7th attacks as terrorism. Murray mentioned that Wahed was part of an extremist group, Hizbah, and questioned whether someone with such views should really be working as an NHS doctor. Murray made it clear that he defines terrorism as deliberately targeting innocent civilians, which he believes Hamas does. He argued that Hamas's attacks fit this definition, whereas the IDF, though it may cause civilian casualties, doesn't intentionally target them. He was skeptical about the casualty figures from Hamas, calling them unreliable and suggesting that comparing the destruction in Gaza to historical events like World War II is misleading. Murray thought it was important to question how much damage really happened and where the figures are coming from. Murray also criticized the UK's tolerance of extremists and questioned why people who support terrorism or extremist ideologies are allowed to live and work in the country, especially in public roles like being an NHS doctor. He suggested that individuals with such views should not be part of the NHS, and even implied that they shouldn't be in the UK at all.
Muslims do not love other Muslims. They have no love for them. They have no love for the Palestinian peoples. None. If they had any, the Jordanians would have taken in the West Bank Palestinians, the Egyptians would have taken in the territory they used to run, the Gaza, and own the Gaza, and they would have taken in the Palestinians from the Gaza. Why have the Egyptians made sure that not one Palestinian is allowed to leave Gaza? Why do they make sure that their border wall is tough as anything? What do they mind? One thing, Jews living. Jews living and Jews winning. It hits them deep in their soul, in their psyche. It's an ancient, ancient hatred. Perhaps the most ancient among the monotheisms, and the deepest and the ugliest, the nastiest, and the one that has been least addressed. And we've imported it.
He even claims Muslims hate other Muslims. According to Murray, Muslims don't really have a strong sense of solidarity or affection for their fellow Muslims. Murray points out that there's hardly any major outcry or protests when Muslims are suffering in places like Syria and Yemen, unlike the attention that conflicts involving Israel get. He argues that if Muslims truly care about each other, there would be more visible support and activism for those affected by these other conflicts. He also criticizes Arab countries like Jordan and Egypt for not helping Palestinian refugees from Gaza or the West Bank. Murray thinks that this refusal to offer refuge is proof that these countries don't prioritize the welfare of their fellow Muslims. He believes that if there was genuine concern, these countries would be more open to taking in Palestinians. Murray uses this idea to highlight what he sees as a deeper issue, suggesting that the lack of support among Muslims for their co-religionists reflects a broader, long-standing anti-Semitic bias. In his view, when criticism of Israel is not balanced with similar scrutiny of other global crises, it's a sign of deeper prejudices rather than a consistent concern for human rights.